Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Nate Doobie from the Five Town and Around podcast. This is our inaugural episode. Five Town and Around is a podcast in which I interview my amazing friends who primarily live in or around Five Town. If you're not familiar with Five Town, it is a geographical area located in central Massachusetts. Today's guest, and the first guest on the show for the first episode, is one of my dearest and closest friends, musician and comedian extraordinaire, Mr. Travis Sweny. Trav, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. What's up, Dewey?
Being the first episode of the show, I thought maybe we could kick off with the topic of music. For those of you who are listening,
sounds great.
Which, I imagine most of the people listening to this probably are friends. So,
right.
For those of you who don't know what Jabuta is, it was a band that we were in. We toured New England for about a decade together. Had a lot of lineup changes, but we were the two integral members that stayed since day one, and we're a fairly well-known staple of the New England jam scene. I played guitar, sang, and did some keyboards, and Trav sang and played bass. What do you have to say about Jabuta and the memories that we had formed? What do you think the legacy of the band was?
Wow. All right, well, that's a loaded question, but for the biggest part of it, as far as I can think of it, Jabuta really, to me, was like we were a community, and we started in such a fashion. We were really just playing music for our friends, and we were really just a band that wanted to entertain our friends, and it kind of spread after that, For sure. Really, I remember very specifically talking to Johnny Peliquin. This might have even been when I was still playing with Doses Upon Doses.
Correct.
With Sean Casey and Ty Sapa, who was my stepbrother.
Throwback Thursday.
And we used to just play these kind of, acid sort of parties at Johnny's place, and these psychedelic throwdowns, and
that's where we met.
That is, well, we met before that, but that's where it culminated.
Musically is...
Musically, yes. I remember, so I was playing in Doses Upon Doses, and, which is, I can't say without a smirk on my face.
For good reason.
Yeah, it's so, it's so subtle. So we were playing at Johnny's, and, I remember Johnny, and so let's rewind for a second. Is that Johnny, I remember telling me, he was like, Johnny, for those of you who don't know, Johnny Peliquin used to throw these epic parties, and we, throughout my whole high school tenure, and even afterwards, Johnny used to throw parties, and that's a huge staple for musicians and even just friends.
Sorry folks, we had a technical difficulty right there. It has been resolved, so picking up where we left off, Trav, why don't you tell us a little bit more about these epic parties that we used to perform at Johnny Peliquin's
all right, so
the Acre.
Yes, the Acre is what we used to call it, and we so Johnny, I remember, reached out to me at one point or another and was saying that he's like, my parties are getting kind of stale and stuff like that, and he wanted to bring more music into it. And I remember this was in the germination phase, or if you will, of Jabuta, and Sean Casey was like kind of getting out of Doses Upon Doses. He's
Yeah, I recall.
starting to meet like his girlfriend at the time or whatever, and he was, you know, unfortunately, when you play in a band, sometimes when a member gets a girlfriend, they will not be in the band anymore, and that's just part of it, you know. And
A lot of bands go through that.
yeah, a lot of bands do. We've had many incarnations of that. So, anyways, Sean was kind of on the outs. He wasn't showing up for practices anymore, and Doobie,
That'd be
at this point, Nathan Doobie was he was my bass teacher.
That's correct. Little known fact. A lot of you probably are unaware of that.
So Doobie used to teach me bass. This is I haven't thought about this in so long. But anyways, Doobie used to teach me bass at my mom's house when I still lived there, and my mom used to always say to me, "Doesn't he look like Jack Black?" So he's like Jack Black, and he's teaching you how to play music. Isn't this just like the movie? And
God bless your mom. I love you.
yeah,
Amazing
I know,
person.
the sweetest person on earth. So, anyways, during this period, Doobie was teaching me how to play bass. He was giving me scales and whatever those other things were.
Yeah, like chord progressions, exercises.
Yeah. So all these
Two-chord
different
vamps.
these different vamps and things like that.
Music theory.
And so we started. I remember this one time that Sean didn't show up, and Doobie did, and it became this very culminating moment where it was like, okay, Sean's kind of got one foot out the door, and Doobie's here, and he's enjoying this, and we're enjoying this. And so it kind of became like this, this new sort of thing. And without knowing it, that's where we kind of became Jabuda.
Yeah, that was definitely the beginning point. I think, we were still tentatively doses upon doses for a very short period of time before, I think, Taisei Bahu was actually in the band for a period of time.
A long time.
Well,
maybe not that long.
Well, from before my joining up, and then, for probably, I'd say 6 months to a year before, he decided to leave. We were the Dagobah system. We were...
Yes, I was going to say, the culmination of names. The Dagobah system. Captain Crunch and the Bucket of Funk.
Fluff.
What else? Just Dagobah. Yep. We had, I don't know, we had a ton of names, and I don't know what if anybody is listening to this. The hardest part of being in a band is deciding what your name is, and I don't care what what you say. It's the hardest fucking part.
Fair enough. I mean,
and we were blessed when John Sepa, he joined the band. And I remember he said, he was like, we should call ourselves a made-up name. Something like Jabuda. And we're all like, bingo, there it is. Like, let's just go, like, let's just stop there and let's just keep going. And that's kind of how Jabuda started. And, it was kind of an avalanche from there. And it was, it was beautiful and rocky. And, it had all different...
incarnations.
Incarnations.
The lineup changed quite a bit over the decade. After Ty left... Benny and John Foley joined up. Foley was with us for maybe about a year and a half, 2 years, and then he had his first child. And what I liked about Foley when he realized it wasn't going to work out, he was just like, I'm sorry guys, I can't do this.
Right.
So we were in a bit of a funk at the time.
And once again, or not once again, but let me just say for the record that digging up JB would not have happened without John Foley, who I remember when John was playing the song.
Yeah, John Say.
Ba, 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 ba. It's like, you're going to have to dig up James Brown to get a beat that good. And then...
Yeah, that was it.
Light bulb for, I imagine you, Doobie, who just like, all right, yeah, I'll take it and run with it from that point. And that's where that song came from.
That's exactly it. Yeah, John Sepa wrote that, which is, to be fair, probably one of, if not our most popular song original that we had written. So, big shout out to John, who was an integral part of the band and really dedicated a lot of time and effort to it.
Yeah.
John Foley was actually the one who named the tune, though, and that was probably the first true incarnation of Jabuta as Jabuta uniquely itself, having left behind, all the different name changes and had gotten to that point. I mean, Benny had been an integral part of that process for about...
Oh, definitely. And we used to practice at Benny's house.
Yep.
And I know this is probably... This was a weird thing that happened. We're on a podcast, so I can say it.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
So as long as we're talking about the history of Jabuta, I remember Benny was so into playing the drums. He wanted to play the drums so bad. Let me say first and foremost, Benny G, one of the maybe the best percussion player I've ever played with. He was insanely good at playing the percussion.
Yeah.
Bongos, congas,
yeah, djembe,
all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then one day,
I remember this.
we go to practice, and we were practicing at Benny's place. I say this with the utmost love. I love Benny to the death.
Oh, for sure.
But one day we go there, and he's got a drum set there.
We
already have a drummer.
Yeah, and he set up directly next to John
right
Foley's
next
kit.
to John Foley's drum set. He's never played drums in his life. And he just decides, hey, I love the Grateful Dead. We're going to have 2 drummers now. And we all bit our lip for a little bit, or bit our tongue for a little bit. And we tried. And Benny, throughout the practice, was like, hey, John, how should I play the drums? How should I do this? How should I do this and that? And John Foley, noticeably irritated,
yeah, he was...
did not, gave him advice. And it was,
yeah,
very sweet and very nice. And and it all culminated when John, I remember John Sapoff was like, hey man, you're not good at drums. And it was this very awkward conversation that we had to have. And Benny, I don't think, wanted to stop playing drums.
No, he didn't.
So
it didn't.
Therefore, ergo, Benny kind of was kicked out / left the band. I don't remember exactly how it went down.
He was a bit disillusioned by the fact that we were not into the drums, and John and I actually asked him to, can you just focus on percussion? It's what you're best at. This is the...
And he was phenomenal.
Yeah,
phenomenal. And I'm not trying to say this just because we're having a podcast, but he was so good at playing percussion.
Yeah, it fit like a glove, and it made sense in the context of what we were doing, what we were trying to achieve artistically. And, Benny's a free spirit. He's, definitely a rock and roll guy, where at the time, Jabuta was sort of almost more of a jazz fusion thing going on. And, when he was like, oh, I'm going to set up this kit and play next to John Foley, it just kind of threw a wrench into the thing. And John and I did have a discussion with him. We brought over a chart of drum practice music, like paradiddles and things of that nature, because we thought he was serious about learning it, and we were like, well, if you can do these things over the course of the next few months, and you can show us that you've put in the effort and you can do this, maybe we could give it a shot. And I think that is the straw that broke the camel's back. And I think, to be fair to Benny, he left. I mean, it felt like we were kicking him out, but towards the last three practices, because he was involved with the band when Brian Blasi first entered. And when Brian came in, who is the most talented drummer that I know, Blasi, if you're listening to this,
Blasi's amazing.
I just think, at that point, Benny decided to leave, and it was also sort of just a natural feeling of, this is how it's going. Like you always used to say, being in a band is a lot like being married to four people, and being married to
big time.
One person is a challenge in and of itself. Being in a band is perhaps the most challenging relationship I've ever been in my entire life. Probably the most, artistically and creatively rewarding relationship, but also
it's like an
ones.
ecosystem. It's like you gotta work with all these different aspects of personalities and stuff like that, and you change as much as they change. It's so beautiful and hard and trying, and I don't know. It's
tough to come.
There's
to a
more
crossroads.
words than I have to explain it, right. But it's I
think anybody who's in a relationship or is in a band or both understands, and
right.
And if you're not, well, you'll find out soon enough.
Right. I totally agree. But anyways, yeah. So we had Benny kind of leaving the band at that point, and around this time we were starting to play the Acre and in Mill Street and stuff like that a bunch, and really I don't know. It's we were all pretty young. And just kind of trying to find our footing.
I think we were unique in that we had a lot of odd and strange synchronicities and opportunities come to us. When, for those of you who aren't familiar, the Mill Street Brews in Southbridge, Massachusetts is an old, what was called an artist development complex. There was a small bar, a large bar, and a huge stage downstairs. The venue hosted, or should I say the LaCantos, Seth. Shout out to Seth. You did some amazing things for the town. He hosted members of the Grateful Dead, of Big Brother and the Holding Company, of Johnny Winter, of the Allman Brothers, all of which, we had the opportunity to open for. And this was within the span of a few years of playing in Johnny's backyard to getting to rub elbows with people like this. And that's when Brian Blasi had entered into it. And what was ironic is when the mill first opened, they used to do webcasts. And now this was back in 2000... 2007, 2008. So webcasting was absurd. Matt Soper, another great friend of mine and a phenomenal musician, he was actually running the video studio where we did the live webcast. We never actually broadcasted live, but we did record a DVD.
We recorded our album there.
Yeah.
Album.
Yeah.
I know you can't see this, but we're doing air quotes.
Yeah. Yes. Live from Planet Earth was actually live from Southbridge, Massachusetts. But it was in a nice studio, and you know what? It's funny because if you watch this...
And we did also 90% of that album first take, because we were... I don't know... And Doobie, you can correct me on this. I know in my mind, I was self-conscious of being we are taking these people's time. We have to do this all in one take. So 90% of it was one take, except for, I want to say, Gypsy Cat Snap. Or
Gypsy Cat and the Nova were both
the Nova. No, it was the Nova. That was we took 3 or 4 times, and we were so apologetic about being oh my God, we're so sorry. This is taking more than one take.
Right.
And because it was a free recording. It was a free recording.
And it was high end too. I mean, they had a legit soundboard.
Yeah, and we got a DVD out of it too. A DVD that maybe 4 people have.
Speaking of which, a quick interjection, Trav. I've been thinking about doing this for a while. Jabuta does have a Facebook page, and if you're interested, I'm going to see what the feedback is from this. I'm hoping to speak to the listeners of the show either through social media or if you want to use a phone. People don't really do that anymore, but The DVD, we sold one physical copy, and Kim Casey owns that. So Kim, you have a
No, I
relic
thought
there.
you won it in a raffle.
You're correct. She won. She won our one physical copy of the DVD because back then it was a real pain in the ass to get this particular file type to DVD.
Gosh.
So she owns the only physical copy, and I have the data file, which I can only get to play on my Mac. So I'm going to figure out a way. Actually, I think I know how to do it, but I would like to broadcast it through Facebook Live in its entirety sometime within. And I've watched it several times. Brian came up here a few years ago, and we watched the whole thing together. You know, looking back on that far back, I remember watching it being like, oh man, I wonder if this is going to be any good. Surprisingly, like, we were extremely focused, and
Well, we used to practice all the time back then, and that's another thing with the band is like, you know, we were focused. We used to play all the time. We used to.
Yeah.
I remember practicing every Saturday for like
48 hours.
I don't know, like 8 years. Every Saturday, I played over here,
and there were times where we did 2 practices, sometimes 3 a week. When Shane joined the band, we went through a phase where we really buckled down.
Yeah, I mean, way before when Shane was here, but like even like when
in
we
the
used to
initial
practice
days,
in Charlton at Blasie's place, we used to play every Saturday, and
every
that
Saturday
was a huge thing, and then even here we played every Saturday.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was. I know it doesn't sound like much, but you know what? We played every Saturday for like
years,
fucking hours.
Yeah,
we used to play for from
our practices were 2 hours long,
from like 10 in the morning to fucking
10 at night.
Yeah, 10 at night. I don't know. We were really probing for inspiration and just going, and that's what improvising is all about, is just you just go, man. You find your premise and you just fucking roll, and it's like whether it's a new song, an old song, we were doing it every fucking week. And I know it, for some extent, it doesn't sound like that's much, but we were really, really invested.
As a group,
and every incarnation of Jabuta, I want to say that we were really strongly invested. We really believed what we were doing. We were really, we were passionate, and I know I could say that for myself. I know you feel the same way, and I feel like every incarnation of it, we really just wanted to push it and see what we could find out. We were probing for different sounds and different feelings. It was, I know it sounds a little, hokey, I guess, but like, man, we wanted to,
push boundaries.
see what was out there.
Yeah.
And it was such a, man, and like when we like played shows, and like when people would come out and see us, and people really dug us, and and it was this incredible feeling of like, hey, we're looking together. We're all trying to find out, what
human existence is through the sound of music.
Yeah, 100%. And I know it sounds silly, but you know what? It was at the time, and and I still believe in this, is that it was worth it, man. Every part of it.
Absolutely.
Was like, I wouldn't take a second of that back. Of just, we we were all freaks. We were all freaks, just like looking for something that was, like just inspiring, and we're probing for this interesting thing.
We had a unique opportunity to kind of, not necessarily in the level of success, but we certainly attempted to follow in the footsteps of people like the Grateful Dead. Fish was a huge influence. And one of the interesting things about having people come and go from the band for whatever issues at hand was that we had a lot of different influences. John was extremely focused on jazz. He really liked a specific sound, and he honed his tone to a specific, very specific place, and that sort of defined Jabuda for the time that he was in the band. Our drummers all have a completely different take on the music. Foley was very much, in my opinion, sort of a straightforward, hard-hitting rock drummer.
Four to the floor.
Very, very precise. Like, great funk, great rock. Blasey was a prodigy. I mean, I honestly think that if he doesn't get famous someday, it's a travesty, because he's seriously that good.
My father used to say, he was like, I've never seen a drummer hit a drum lighter than Brian Blasey. My dad used to play drums, and it like bothered him so much. He's like, why isn't he hitting that drum harder? I'm like, because he's good at it. Well, it's like Brian Blasey. Why is he doing it? I gotta do it. It's like because he's better at it than you are.
That's hilarious. I mean, Brian Blasey's the Muhammad Ali of drummers. He flies like a butterfly, but he stings like a bee.
Right.
And then you had Chuck, who, in my mind, like, he sort of embodied certain
Chuck's
qualities
a great
of both of them.
jam drummer, which I love.
Yeah.
He's very he very much listens. And
I feel like he was almost a 50-50 split between the dynamics.
That's a
of Foley
great way
and
of putting it. Yeah, I agree with that.
Because he was a bit more technical than Foley, but he also was a hard-hitting,
Oh, he's such a deadhead.
Yeah. Particularly,
I mean, Chuck is...
He's more of a Kreutzmann than a Mickey Hart, I'd say.
Yeah.
But
I'd say that,
and I say that as a compliment, because I love both of their styles, but there's something about Bill Kreutzmann, and I feel like Chuck kind of
I don't know. I've always loved Kreutzmann way more than I like Mickey Hart.
Well, the Rhythm Devils, they're kind of part and parcel.
Mickey.
Mickey,
but yeah,
Mickey, if you're listening, I'm terribly sorry. I'm a big fan.
I'm not. Anyways, what I'm saying is, anyways, Chuck, and Zach Lordich, I remember saying this to me, he's like, Chuck is such a great jam drummer. The biggest thing is you gotta listen. And I know that seems so trite, so like, oh yeah, of course I gotta listen. But it's harder than what maybe people, I don't know, you say listen, like walk.
Right.
Talk, or look, listening is, it takes some depth too, In
the context of the performing arts, it's particularly not something that you can just be good at instantly. It takes a certain level of concentration and focus.
It takes practice.
Exactly.
And listening, I mean this to a depth of even like therapy, and music can be therapy too.
Of course.
That, listening is such an overlooked thing that it can really add something so meaningful and such depth that can really, it can really put a stamp on things. Yeah, I don't know how else to put it.
It provides value to the people that you're engaged with, whether that's a band or a friend or a lover or a family member, and in our society today, there's not a lot of listening. There's a lot of people are talking. And, well, that's not fair. I think a lot of people are listening. I hope people are listening to this podcast. But, you know, listening to me talk. But no, like, listening is a key skill that I think creative types, whether it be, and this is a good segue actually, listening in the context of improvisation is not only important in music, but also in comedy. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you sort of have a burgeoning comedy career. I know that you're writing scripts for skits, what could potentially become movie scripts or for a television show, and you're also involved in improv and maybe a little stand-up?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I haven't done any stand-up yet, but I'm trying to piece together some bits for stand-up. The more I write for comedy, I don't know, it seems like I don't know, I just love sketch so much. So I love sketch comedy. I love, like, SNL.
So that's the direction you see yourself going in, not so much doing stand-up, but...
Well, every time I try to write for stand-up, I find myself finding a better sketch out of it. And it's hard, you know. I love stand-up. Stand-up is such a pure form of comedy.
Who are your top 3 stand-up comedians?
Whew, well, that's tough. I really love...
Like, who comes to the top of your mind when you first hear that?
Well, Dave Chappelle.
I knew that was coming.
I really love Dave Chappelle. I also really love... Let's see... I love John Mulaney and Seinfeld, you know?
Jerry Seinfeld, yeah, that's a classic right there. I mean, I don't know too many people who don't like Seinfeld.
Well, Seinfeld, he's, you know, he's clean, and also I love Brian Regan, who's very much like John Seinfeld. He's not Jerry Seinfeld. Whoever he is. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I just love good jokes, man, and there's so many comedians who I love.
Can I ask you your opinion about this comedian that I saw recently at Inbound 2019? It's a marketing conference in Boston, but the owner of the conference is a huge deadhead, and so he puts on quite a show. It feels it's not so much a marketing conference as it's a concert or a festival, and they kind of put these two things together. It's an odd meeting of corporate America and, you know, a light rave is how I would put it. I mean,
okay,
Brian, if you're listening to this and that's not exactly what you were going for, I'm sorry, but that's what I took from it, and it was a lot of fun. The white room with the fuzzy furniture and the ball pit. I mean, it just screams rave to me. So Chelsea Handler was the headliner for the comedy show. A kid named Jabuki, I forget what his last name is, Obenver. He was amazing, and Chelsea was okay. What is your opinion of Chelsea Handler? Because I'm not a comedy guy. I've only gone to 2 comedy shows, and it was this year.
Well, Chelsea Handler, I think that she... It's I mean, as far as her comedy goes, I don't know much about it. I know that she has or had a show.
Yeah, she used to be like I think a talk show host or something to that effect, and she kind of segged into it. I will say that I was shocked by her because she came out on stage, and the first thing she said was something to the effect of, "I want to get something out of the way real quick, everybody." And this was in front of 36,000 people, so it was a bold thing to say. I love drugs. I love talking about them. I love doing them. And
well, I love her openness right away. I think that much.
You know,
I like
the main bit she did was apparently she went to the Amazon. I thought she was gonna say doing ayahuasca, but it turns out she was smoking toad venom. That's
all right. Well, I like that too.
well, that's when you know you're serious about this. I mean, ayahuasca is very in vogue nowadays, but I know plenty of people who've experimented with DMT. Have you ever smoked toad venom? That's I don't get a yes to that answer very often. So when she kind of told the whole thing,
Oh, well, that's great.
Right.
Honestly, I think that's a great bit. And I'm so in the toddler baby steps of doing comedy. So for me to judge anybody, especially who's successful, it would be just
right.
ridiculous
And,
of
and
me.
you're not familiar with her stuff.
And,
So I was just
and
curious.
I don't know any of her stuff. And anyways, I just think that I don't know. I think doing comedy is just I don't know. It's so personable. It's
What parallels do you draw between playing music and doing comedy?
well, it's especially what's been taught in improv is yes and yes and is the concept of I say to you these flowers are purple. It's like, yes, and they're in a green vase. Yes, and these green vases come from this place
In Singapore.
in Singapore, where the people who make them are very oppressed. Yes, and they're oppressed because they are writing horrible blogs about people who make podcasts about
MAGA hats.
MAGA hats. And yes, and
Yes, yeah. Yeah,
and so well, improv is much for comedy and for music. It's a lot of the same thing. You agree and you add, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah, I mean it's like verbatim what it's pretty much sure, the Allman Brothers did it too, but I think the Grateful Dead are probably the epoch of the whole communicative process of improv, at least in a musical standpoint, although I'm sure they were very funny. Getting to hang out with Tom Constantin, that was an interesting experience. Very conservative, kind of quiet guy, for someone who got to...
That was at the Mill, wasn't it?
Yep, backstage at the Mill. It was Walt B. and Friends. Walt, I'm going to tell this story, hopefully it's okay. Walt, I guess, came across a large sum of money, and what did he decide to do with it? He had been jamming with Tom Constantin in a group and said, hey, if I came up with a decent paycheck, do you think you could get Kenny Brooks and Mark Coran and I think Donna Jean was there as well, if I'm not mistaken. So it was a very interesting collective of...
Sorry, Donna Jean. I made the fart noise.
Yeah.
It wasn't Doobie.
No.
He's a good sport.
No,
Sorry, your voice is horrible.
That's that's a matter of opinion.
I don't care.
As far as I'm concerned, Donna, you had some really good nights and you had some really long days.
No.
But to get back on topic, improvisation. Yeah, the parallels that you see in like the context of how the Grateful Dead would communicate musically and what they were trying to achieve, that's essentially the same thing that a group of comedians, whether it be in a skit, working together on stage like Tenacious D, or perhaps in a film. Maybe not in a film so much because there's a script, but there's a various level of improvisation in even those situations. I think improvisation is perhaps one of the most important aspects of the creative process. At least it's a big thing for me, and I know that it has contributed to my creative ideas in both music and production, video, animation, etc. I think we're nearing the hour mark, and I'm going to have to bring this to a close. So I hope that everyone who listened to this enjoyed it, got a laugh out of it, and enjoyed the history of Djibouti and the conversations regarding improvisation in the context of music and comedy. And this is the first of what will hopefully be many other episodes. I hope that you all tune in next week, which, if all goes right, Jula Bula should be on the show. Jula, if you're listening, you were supposed to be here yesterday, and the third time that we've scheduled and you haven't shown up. I'm sorry.
Come on, Jula.
No, nothing but love for you, Jula. I really want you on the show, which is why I'm tentatively putting you on blast. So, in closing, I just want to say thank you for tuning in to Five Town and Around. My name is Nathan Doobie. Today's guest was Travis Sweny. And I just want to say to you guys, be safe, be well, light and love. And tune in next week. This was Five Town and Around. Peace out.